I woke up in the hostel room early in the morning, where the familiar sounds of Paris seeped through the half-open window. The cooing of pigeons on the tiled roof, the whispers of early risers, and in the distance, the sound of buses rolling along the cobbled street. The soft, pale light of dawn shone in, making the room come alive. I put on a light jacket and went downstairs. The common kitchen of the hostel already had a few people having breakfast, mostly young travellers like me, holding maps, phones, or simply steaming cups of coffee. I helped myself to a slice of still warm baguette, spread a thin layer of butter, added some deep red strawberry jam. A cup of black coffee was poured out, its bitter aroma filling the air. In that moment, I realized the difference from mornings in Sydney, where I used to hurriedly buy a cappuccino in a paper cup and rush into the office. Here, even in a small hostel, breakfast felt slower, enough to savor each moment. I sat down at the long wooden table, listening to conversations in many languages: English, Spanish, Italian. A group of young friends discussed their plans to go to the Louvre, while a couple giggled about their night train trip. I didn't join any of the conversations, just listened, as if I were living inside a colourful travel symphony. When I finished eating, I cleared my tray, laced up my shoes, put on my backpack, and stepped outside. The fresh morning air of Paris filled my lungs. I knew today would be a long day, a day I wanted to hold completely in my memory. I followed the road leading toward the Seine, where the water reflected the pale golden light of morning. The arched stone bridges connected the two banks, and beneath my feet, each cobblestone seemed to hold centuries of history. As I approached Notre, I slowed my pace. The cathedral rose high with its two majestic towers, like a giant stone book telling the story of Paris. The intricately carved facade reminded me of the small churches in Sydney I had once passed, but clearly the scale and historical depth here were entirely different. I stopped by the riverbank watching small boats move steadily. A few street artists displayed paintings of Paris landscapes, their bright colours on coarse paper. An old man played the accordion, the melody echoing through the space, adding a touch of romance to the scene. I wandered around the square in front of the cathedral, where tourists lined up to enter. I wasn't in a hurry, just stood gazing at the statues of saints above. It felt like Paris didn't need to prove anything. The city simply existed, with all its beauty and the gravity of its history. After nearly an hour of walking, my morning energy had begun to wear off. I realized I was getting hungry again. My steps naturally led me toward a small street where the smell of freshly baked pastries drifted out invitingly. The little bakery appeared with a clear glass window showcasing all kinds of pastries: golden croissants, buttery pain au chocolat, vibrant fruit tarts. I stepped inside, the doorbell jingling. The air was filled with butter, vanilla, and freshly baked bread, a warmth that felt strangely comforting. I chose a croissant and a café au lait. Sitting at a small wooden table near the window, I took a bite. The outer crust crackled, the inside soft and tender, the butter melting on my tongue. A flavour so perfect I wondered why croissants in Sydney had always felt so ordinary. Here it was an art form. At the next table, a petite, elderly Parisian woman with neatly tied silver hair sat. She smiled at me and began speaking in French. I replied awkwardly, mixing in some English words. She didn't mind, patiently slowing her speech, and soon we understood each other through gestures and glances. She told me she had lived in this district her whole life, and since her youth had come to this bakery every morning. For her, Paris had changed a lot, but the smell of the bread remained the same. I nodded, suddenly feeling a quiet relief. There truly are things in this world that endure. When I left the bakery, I carried with me not only the taste of the croissant, but also the smile and kind eyes of the Parisian grandmother. In the afternoon, I stopped at the Jardin des Tuileries. The vast garden lay between the Louvre and Place de la Concorde, lush and peaceful. I chose a green metal chair by the round pond, where wooden toy boats were being pushed out by children with bamboo sticks. I sat quietly, letting the cool breeze brush against my face. The city's sounds seemed to slow, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, the gentle footsteps of people strolling. I pulled out my notebook, jotting down a few short lines about today, as a way to hold on to each moment. Beside me, an old man sat down, holding a newspaper. We started talking, and to my surprise, he spoke some English. He told me he had once been a French literature teacher, now retired. He asked where I came from. When I said Australia, he smiled. "So, you've crossed half the world to sit here." The conversation was light, yet profound. He spoke of Paris as if of an old friend, sometimes noisy, sometimes difficult, but always lovable. I thought of Sydney, where everything is modern and spacious, but lacking the layers of history that Paris holds. Before he got up to leave, he looked at me and said, "Just go slowly. Paris will tell you its story." I smiled, engraving those words as a reminder. By late afternoon, I boarded a tourist boat on the Seine. The sky began to turn golden orange, reflected on the shimmering water. As the boat glided along, the cool river breeze brushed against my face, carrying the scent of damp wood from the docks and faint smoke from riverside cafes. On both banks, Paris drifted by like a slow-moving film. The Eiffel Tower in the distance beginning to light up, the Alexandre III Bridge with its majestic bronze statues, the Orsay Museum with its graceful facade. I leaned against the railing, watching the sun sink, leaving a crimson trail across the sky. There was an absolute peace in that moment. I recalled the morning, when I had still been in the little hostel, then step by step through Notre Dame, the bakery, the park. All of it converged in this moment, as if Paris was embracing me in its gentle arms. I thought about Sydney, where I often rushed to end the day with a subway ride and a late dinner. Here, I ended a day with a sunset on the Seine. The difference was not only in the scenery, but in the very way I was living. When the boat returned to the dock, Paris's lights had come on, reflecting on the water like stars. I stood up, knowing tomorrow would bring new experiences, but tonight I wanted to hold this completely in my heart. The memory of a Paris both magnificent and intimate, both strange and familiar.